Some battles aren't fought with fists. They're fought with paperwork, pride, and the lake that remembers every mistake. On that morning, the sun lit the water like firelight as the HOA president marched toward me with a tow truck behind her, ready to steal something that was never hers. And she didn't know that she'd just stepped onto my lake. If you're into real-life revenge twists, make sure you hit subscribe before the next curve hits. Now let's begin. Most mornings on my lake start the same wake-wired water. Cedar-scented air and coffee warm enough to wake the bones. Peace isn't a luxury out here. It's a daily promise the land keeps if you treat it right. But that Saturday, peace barely lasted a minute. I had just settled on my porch rail, chipped blue mug in hand, when I heard the clatter of chains and the heavy grind of tires on gravel. Sophie Ward, our self-declared queen of the HOA, stormed down my dock, as if she owned every plank. Sunglasses on clipboard swinging, heels stabbing into the wood like she was fighting the earth itself. Behind her, a tow truck rolled in with the enthusiasm of a man heading to his own execution. "That boat is oversized," she barked at him. "Community access is blocked. Remove it immediately." The driver shifted awkwardly, glancing between my boat and her like he wanted a witness for whatever this was about to become. "Mais Anouilh," one of her board members tried to swagger forward only to step off the side of the dock and plunge straight into the shallows. The splash echoed across the cove, and the crowd that had gathered let out a laugh. Even the lake repeated. Sophie went red. Not pink. Not embarrassed. Red. Trying to recover, she slapped a neon violation sticker onto my hull. The lake breeze must have been feeling playful, because it peeled off instantly and stuck neatly onto the toe of her expensive shoe. I couldn't help it. I laughed out loud. So did half the neighborhood. That's when a familiar cruiser rolled up the road. Sheriff Tom, my brother, stepped out slow, hat low, eyes tired from years of watching adults act like toddlers. "Ma'am," he asked calmly, "you got paperwork for this removal?" Sophie froze. "C'est vivente," and that absence of paper said everything. I took a slow sip of coffee. I'd known for months this wasn't really about a boat. Sophie's obsession had grown roots fines, warnings, suddenly invented view ordinances. But what she didn't know was that the shoreline she was picking a fight over wasn't hers to regulate. And soon enough, the HOA would realize they'd been trespassing on private water long before they ever accused me of a violation. My grandfather taught me the truth of the lake, long before I ever earned the right to guard it. He handed me a sealed envelope beside an old granite boundary marker and said, "You'll need this when someone thinks a signature gives them more power than respect." A was right. And Sophia, she was the living proof of it. I pulled that envelope from my desk the night her first letter arrived. Not to fight, just to prepare. My family had been stewards of this water for nearly a century. We didn't own it like a trophy. We protected it like history. That's something Sophie's world of fonts, fines, and bylaws could never understand. If you've ever dealt with someone who mistakes authority for ownership, you already know where this is headed. Before the real storm hits, make sure you're subscribed. You won't want to miss how this showdown escalates. Sophie's letters had grown sharper, neighbor by neighbor. Tekim dome, copies of warnings, fines, demands, failure to comply. Unauthorized lawn decor, non-standard porch chair. She once wrote up a guy for a kid's soccer net. People were tired and afraid. But they weren't alone anymore. I began documenting everything: dates, weather, witness accounts. When paper comes for you, you meet it with better paper. Because Sophie wasn't just breaking rules, she was crossing lines she didn't even know existed. What Sophie did next proved she wasn't backing down. She was escalating. And when she returned with reinforcements, a camera crew, and a brand new excuse for authority, she didn't just cross my property line, she stepped into a trap she never saw coming. If you thought Sophie embarrassing herself with a violation sticker on her own shoe was bad, you're not ready for what she did next. Because the following weekend, she didn't just return angry. She returned armed with a camera crew, a cheap lawyer, and a brand new fake rule she invented in her car. Let's pick up right there. Trouble always announces itself long before it arrives. Sometimes it's thunder. Sometimes it's headlights. And sometimes it's the sound of 3 HOA board members in matching polos marching down my road like they're storming the beaches. That Saturday morning, the lake was still, almost too still. Sunlight bounced off the water like broken glass as Sophie Ward led her little parade straight toward my dock. She wasn't alone. Behind her came Carl Jenkins, the man who could turn a human conversation into a spreadsheet, Deborah Ross, the so-called decorum enforcer, carrying a clipboard like it was a holy relic, a tow truck driver, the same poor guy she traumatized last week, and a man in a tight navy suit, clutching a briefcase like it held the nuclear codes. And to top it off, a cameraman with a shoulder rig, filming every step like this, was a documentary about bad decisions. I took a sip of my coffee and settled deeper into my rocking chair. This was going to be entertainment. Sophie plastered on her official smile, the one that looks like she'd rather swallow gravel than say hello. "Good morning, Mr. Sanders," she said, voice sugary but trembling. "I trust you're ready to cooperate today." "Morning," I said. "Fish are biting. Nonsense still stinks." Her eye twitched. The man in the suit cleared his throat, puffing up like a scared pigeon. "I am Mr. Robert Klein, legal counsel for the Lakeview Homeowners Association. We're here regarding your continued violation of Community Code 5B. The neighbors who gathered behind them shared a collective "uh-oh." Phones came out again. People love a good sequel. "Violation?" I asked calmly. "Which one is that?" Sophie stepped forward triumphantly. "Your boat obstructs the view corridor." Primetta blinked. "To what?" "The view corridor," she repeated, louder, like the lake would suddenly understand HOA language if she shouted it enough. Even the cameraman raised an eyebrow. "Right," I said. "Did that rule exist yesterday?" Deborah flipped nervously through her binder, papers fluttering like startled birds. Sophie kept going anyway. "This is HOA jurisdiction," she said. "All shoreline visible from the neighborhood is under our authority." Behind me, a neighbor muttered loudly, "Since when can they regulate sight?" I gestured to Sophie. "Go ahead. Say it clearly for the camera. You claim the HOA has jurisdiction over this lake?" She lifted her chin. "Yes. Full jurisdiction." "Perfect," I said. "That's all I needed." Her lawyer blinked. "Needed? What do you mean, needed?" Before I could answer, a deep engine rumble rolled across the water. Everyone turned. A white van with blue stripes pulled into view. 4 officers stepped out. Phones whipped up faster than a fire drill. "Morning," the lead officer said. "We received a report of an unauthorized maritime seizure attempt." I raised a hand. That was me. Figured I'd let the professionals explain riparian law. Sophie's face drained color like a leaking bucket. "This isn't maritime," she snapped. "This is community business." The officer stared at her. "Ma'am, HOA bylaws don't apply to private docks or navigable waters. Do you have county documentation?" Her lawyer frantically flipped through his binder, which, based on the pages falling out, contained printouts from the HOA website. Random highlighted paragraphs. One sheet that looked suspiciously like Wikipedia. The officer inspected the pages and exhaled slowly. "This is not legal documentation." Turned to me. "Mr. Sanders, your paperwork is valid. This dock and vessel are entirely within your private parcel." By then Sophie Kitts started fishing her binder pages out of the water like treasure, reading lines such as visual harmony enforcement out loud. The neighbors exploded with laughter. I didn't gloat, but I did sip my coffee very slowly. If you're enjoying watching this HOA Unravel live on camera, don't forget to hit subscribe. Because, trust me, things get even wilder from here. The Coast Guard leaving should have ended it, but when Sophie realized the law wasn't on her side, she didn't back down. She doubled down. Hard, and her next move didn't just embarrass her. It exposed the HOA's biggest secret, the one they never expected me to uncover. Most people, after being corrected by the Coast Guard on live camera, would go home. maybe rethink their life choices. But Sophie Ward? She walked away from that dock, soaked in humiliation, and came back, planning revenge. And she was about to learn the lake protects its own. The story of Sophie versus the Coast Guard spread through the neighborhood faster than wildfire in Dry Pine. By Monday morning, our town's gossip grapevine had grown branches. Did you see her binder fall in the water? Did she really claim visual harmony is a legal term? Why was her lawyer sweating like he ran a marathon? Someone even made a remix of the officer saying, "So is the moon, ma'am." But the star of every conversation, Sophie's soaked binder floating like a sad jellyfish. You'd think that would slow her down. But Sophie isn't built from humility. She's built from pure, concentrated stubbornness. By the next weekend, I noticed the signs. HOA trucks parked near the entrance. Men in polo shirts whispering, a shiny black sedan idling too long by the ramp. So I brewed an extra pot of coffee. Trouble was on schedule. Around mid-morning, Sophie marched down the gravel path, again heels clacking like angry metronomes. Her entourage looked even more miserable this time. Carl, clutching his clipboard like a life raft. Deborah, pretending she wasn't terrified. Poor Mark, the tow truck driver, dragged back against his will. Sophie forced a smile so tight it looked like it hurt. "Mr. Sanders," she announced, chin up, "the HOA board has unanimously confirmed your boat must be removed." Jim from the Yellow Ranch house whispered, "Unanimous. There's only 3 of them, and one hates her." I almost choked on my coffee. Sophie pointed at Mark. "Prosea." He sighed and reluctantly dragged the chain toward my boat. That'd be the second time he tried this. Before the metal even touched the hull, a familiar rumble interrupted everything. Sheriff Tom rolled up again, cruiser dust swirling behind him. He stepped out slow. Not angry, just disappointed like a dad catching his kid stealing cookies for the 3rd time. "What's today's crisis?" he asked. "Somebody misaligned their garden gnomes." The crowd laughed. Sophie didn't. "Sheriff," she snapped, "we are conducting a lawful removal under HOA authority." Tom tilted his head. "Ma'am, HOA authority ends at your sidewalks." She pointed at my boat. "He is obstructing community access." Tom blinked slowly. "Access to what?" "His own property," Mark muttered. "Told you," under his breath. Sophie's voice cracked. "This dock falls under scenic jurisdiction." Tom raised an eyebrow high enough to touch his hat brim. "Scenic jurisdiction?" Behind him, a neighbor whispered, "She's just making stuff up now." Sophie doubled down. "It's in the bylaws." Tom nodded the way you nod at a toddler insisting the moon is made of cheese. "Surit ist. This time, we are enforcing it." And she slapped another violation sticker on my boat. The lake windless, its mischievous soul peeled it right back off. It floated dramatically down and stuck onto her bright pink heel. Again, the crowd erupted like a stadium. People were wheezing. Someone dropped a cooler. A teenager fell into the grass laughing. I smiled politely. "Careful, Sophia, your jurisdiction is following you again." Her lieutenants didn't know whether to peel it off or pretend they didn't see it. Sheriff Tom finally stepped in, voice firm. "Sophie, this is your last warning. Step on this dock again without a legal order, and it won't be a conversation. It'll be a citation." A hush fell. Even the geese stopped honking. For a second, I thought she might back down, but pride is a stubborn engine. Hers runs on fumes. "This isn't over," she hissed. She spun around, stomped up the ramp, and vanished behind the tree sticker, still flapping on her shoe like a flag of surrender. If you're enjoying watching her dig this hole deeper with every step, hit that subscribe button, because, trust me, the next thing she does had me laughing for a week. Once Sophie stormed off, neighbors swarmed the dock. "Carl, that was beautiful. We got every angle recorded." I swear she invents a new rule each visit. For the first time, people weren't scared of the HOA anymore. They were laughing at it. and nothing destroys a bully faster than being turned into a punchline. But while the neighborhood celebrated her retreat, Sophie was somewhere else doing what she does best, and when she returned, she wouldn't come with just a tow truck. She'd come with something far more dangerous, a lawyer who didn't know he was walking into a trap. If you thought the View Corridor fiasco was peak HOA madness, you're about to witness Sophie's boldest stunt yet, because this time, she didn't just bring a tow truck. She brought a lawyer so unprepared. Even his briefcase looked nervous. Let's pick up right where she crashed into her own downfall. You can feel a bad idea approaching the same way you feel a summer storm. The pressure rises, the air thickens, and the birds go quiet. By next weekend, that pressure was back. The neighborhood felt it too. People peered from porches. Dogs barked at nothing, and the lake was so still it looked like polished steel. Right at 9:07 a.m., the silence cracked. An SUV engine whined up the road. Then came the unmistakable rhythm of Sophie's heels, rapid, sharp, furious. And behind her, a full entourage, even bigger than last time, to board members with matching polos and matching panic. One camera guy hauling a rig on his shoulder. A terrified man in a wrinkled navy suit carrying a briefcase way too shiny to be trustworthy. And, of course, poor Mark, the tow truck driver, dragged back like a hostage. Sophie strutted onto the dock as if she'd been waiting all week to deliver a monologue. "Residents," she declared dramatically, even though only gulls were listening. "Today, the HOA will take corrective action." The man in the suit stepped forward, wiping sweat from his forehead like he was getting paid in fear rather than money. "Ahem," he squeaked. "I am Robert Klein, licensed attorney representing the Homeowners Association." His voice cracked on the word licensed. Not a great sign. I leaned on the railing, sipping my coffee slowly. "Well then, Mr. Klein," I said, "what brings you to my dock this fine morning?" He opened the binder Sophie had clearly forced into his hands. Under HOA Charter Article 9, he announced, "The association reserves the right to enforce property codes on all land and water that affects communal aesthetics." I raised an eyebrow. "Affects aesthetics?" "That's correct," he said proudly. "So, if something looks ugly, you think you can regulate it?" "Yes," he said, without hesitation. "Your tie's crooked," I replied. The neighbors burst into silent laughter. Sophie stepped forward impatiently. "Mr. Sanders, your boat's reflective hull is obstructing the visual harmony of the neighborhood." Visual harmony. I almost spit out my coffee. "Visual harmony," I repeated. "Is that in the bylaws?" "Yes," she snapped. "It's right." She flipped through her binder. Pages fluttered out like frightened pigeons. Deborah peeked over her shoulder, whispering rapidly. Sophie's eyes darted left, then right. "It's in here somewhere," she insisted. "Surit was—" I took a step toward her. "Since you're so confident, let's make it official. Say it clearly for all the cameras. Your HOA has legal authority over this lake." Her jaw lifted like a crane. "Yes, the HOA has full jurisdiction over all water visible from community boundaries." "Great," I said quietly. That was the last piece I needed. Mr. Klein blinked. Needed? For what? Before I could answer, a low rumble rolled across the shore. Everyone turned. A white van with U.S. Coast Guard auxiliary markings pulled up. Phones shot upward like fireworks. 4 officers stepped out, vests, radios, clipboards, the kind of people who actually know what jurisdiction means. The lead officer spoke. "We received a report of an unauthorized seizure attempt of a registered vessel." "Everything all right here?" Sophie's smile died. I raised my hand. That was me who called. Figured they should hear it directly from the source. The officer turned to Sophie. "Ma'am, are you attempting to enforce removal on this boat?" "This isn't maritime business," she snapped. "It's community regulation." He stared at her with the expression of a man reconsidering every career decision that led him here. "Ma'am, HOA. Rules do not apply to navigable waters or private docks. Do you have county documentation?" Klein opened his binder. Pages shuffled. A printed Wikipedia paragraph slipped out. Kids from the neighborhood started retrieving loose pages floating in the lake. One kid read aloud, "Visual Harmony Enforcement Protocol." What does that even mean? The crowd roared. The officer held up the soggy printouts. "This is not legal documentation." Then he turned to me. "Mr. Sanders, your paperwork checks out. The property line is clear." I nodded. "Appreciate the help, officer. Coffee's hot. If you want some." He smiled. Next time? Sophie's face looked like a storm cloud that lost its lightning. She grabbed her binder, heels squeaking across the dock, and stormed off Kamara, catching every miserable step. If you're enjoying this HOA carnage, go ahead and hit subscribe, because the next chapter turns this whole drama into a full-blown reality show. Sophie left that dock defeated, but not destroyed, because what she did next was her boldest, wildest, most desperate move. She tried to take the lake back with a public protest, a news crew, and one giant mistake she didn't know I already owned. Most battles end when the loser walks away. But Sophie Ward wasn't a normal opponent. She was a storm pretending to be a person. And her next attack wasn't just dramatic. It was public, with cameras, crowds, speeches, and a secret weakness she didn't know she'd handed straight to me. By the time the Coast Guard left and Sophie's heels disappeared into the tree line, the neighborhood was buzzing. People posted videos, memes, remixes. Someone even edited her shouting community access into a heavy-beat techno track. The HOA looked ridiculous, and nothing terrifies a wannabe tyrant more than becoming a joke. But instead of backing down, Sophie did something new. She got louder. 2 days later, glossy flyers began appearing in mailboxes across the neighborhood. Giant red letters screamed, "Community emergency meeting, take back the lake." Delegation, the marina. Saturday noon. I nearly laughed out loud, because what Sophie didn't know was this. I had recently acquired the marina's mortgage note through my LLC, Blue Cedar Holdings, which meant the HOA was planning their big protest on property I controlled. It was legal, notarized, and recorded, and Sophie was about to march straight onto land she technically owed me money for. But why warn her early? Some lessons hit harder when they land on live television. That morning felt like the 4th of July had shown up early. On my side of the marina, families set up folding chairs. Kids ran with water guns, a band tuned guitars under a canopy. Grill smoke drifted through the air like celebration incense, because I'd posted my own announcement: community BBQ and lake celebration. Saturday noon. Free for all. The timing wasn't petty. Well, maybe a little. Across the lake, Sophie's convoy arrived. 2 SUVs. A sedan dragging a banner, and of course the news crew she personally invited. She stepped out, wearing a pink blazer, so bright it could signal satellites. "Residents?" she shouted into a megaphone. "We are here to reclaim our lake." The band on my side struck up a cheerful tune at the same time. Neighbors clapped along. Cameras swung back and forth, unsure which side was the real story. Spoiler: it wasn't the screaming woman with a clipboard. Sophie pulled out her newest prop, a paper with a red seal. "This," she declared, "is a legal confirmation from our HOA attorney, proving our jurisdiction over this shoreline." She held it high, shaking slightly. "Mind if I take a look?" I asked. She hesitated but handed it over. I skimmed it once, twice, then turned the page around for everyone to see. On the back, in faint gray watermark, "Template sample do not use for official purposes." The crowd roared. Someone yelled, "Did she print her legal papers from Google?" Sophie went pale. "That's irrelevant," she shouted. Sheriff Tom stepped in. "Mom, distributing falsified legal documents is relevant." "Very," she sputtered. "You're all conspiring against me." But she wasn't finished embarrassing herself. A loud metallic clunk echoed across the marina. Everyone turned. Sophie's black SUV, parked halfway across the boat ramp, was being hooked up by a tow truck, the same tow truck driver she'd dragged into her mess for weeks. He gave me a wink. "Just enforcing the new property owner's request," he said. "Property owner." Sophie screamed. I lifted the deed and mortgage paperwork. "Blue Cedar Holdings," I said. "My LLC. I bought the marina's debt." Gasps spread through the crowd like wildfire. Someone shouted, "He owns the stage she's standing on." Tom almost dropped his coffee, laughing. Sophie lunged at the papers, but Tom blocked her. "Touch those, and that's tampering." Mark tightened the chain. Her SUV lurched. The HOA banner flapped like a defeated flag. The crowd chanted, "Tow the Queen! Tow the Queen!" And when her megaphone slipped out of her hand and rolled into the water, the universe itself was clapping. If you're loving this downfall and want more HOA chaos, hit that subscribe button now, because the next chapter goes bigger, louder, and completely off the rails. By sundown, the HOA was humiliated. The marina belonged to me. And Sophie was on the evening news, claiming she was the victim of maritime conspiracies. But she wasn't finished, because her final move, it wasn't a protest. It was a lawsuit, and the courtroom showdown that followed changed everything. The courtroom still hummed with whispers when Judge Whitaker picked up the final document from the stack. Sophie stood frozen, jaw trembling, her lawyer shrinking into his chair like he wished he could vanish into his briefcase. The judge cleared his throat. Based on the evidence presented, he said, "This court finds the Lakeview HOA has no jurisdiction over Mr. Sanders's property or the lake." Gasps filled the room. Sophie's mouth fell open. Her lawyer blinked like he'd been hit with a flashlight. And further, Whitaker continued, voice firm and final. "The HOA is ordered to pay all legal fees and is prohibited from attempting any future enforcement on or around Lake Sanders." He struck the gavel. Bung, like thunder rolling across water. It was done. The courtroom erupted cheers. Applause, relief, laughter. People who get some even cried. For the first time in months, the community wasn't afraid. Sophie was escorted out, still shouting over her shoulder. "This isn't over." "I'll appeal," her lawyer muttered. "Please stop," and followed her out like a man abandoning a sinking ship. But everyone in that room knew the truth. It was over. By the next morning, an official notice was nailed to the Marina Post. HOA authority terminated by court order. People took photos. Some framed Italiano. Others used it as a phone wallpaper. Deputies gathered the HOA's leftover signs, violation stickers, approved paint-color charts, fake bylaws, and stacked them neatly on the dock like relics of a dictator's fallen palace. Someone played a triumphant fiddle tune while the lake breeze scattered the last loose papers like confetti. Sheriff Tom walked up beside me, arms crossed. "You think she'd try something again?" he asked. I shook my head. "Not anymore. Pride can float, but not forever." We shared a quiet laugh. For the first time in too long, the lake felt light again. By evening, the entire town gathered by the water-old fishermen, kids skipping stones, families bringing dishes of homemade food. Lanterns were strung between trees, glowing like fireflies caught in mid. The band set up again, but this time the music wasn't competing with shouting or fines. It belonged here. Just like the people. Linda strummed her guitar softly as she sat on the dock. Jim handed out iced lemonade like a bartender at a summer fair. Even Nancy, the woman who once got fined for a non-compliant Christmas wreath, laughed louder than anyone. When sunset settled on the lake, the water turned gold. I stood at the edge of the dock, breathing in peace I hadn't tasted in months. That's when Tom joined me, hands in his pockets. "You did it," he said quietly. I shook my head. "No. We did. The community did. They just needed permission to stop being scared." A nodded. "You gonna tell them?" "Tell them what?" Tom smirked. "That the county approved your request." I raised an eyebrow. "For the renaming." He nodded slowly. "Starting tomorrow, it's officially Lake Sanders." I stared out of the water. heart swelling in a way I hadn't felt since Grandpa Earl taught me to cast a fishing line on this very bank. The lake shimmered back at me, like it was smiling. Night settled. Lanterns floated on the lake, tiny drifting stars carrying wishes across the water. A little girl tugged my sleeve. "Mr. Sanders," she whispered, "is the lake safe now?" I knelt beside her. "It's safe," I said. "And it always will be." She smiled, relieved, and ran back to her family. I looked out across the black glass surface of the water and felt Grandpa beside me. The way he'd stand quiet, but proud, hands in pockets, pipe in his teeth. "This one's for you, old man," I whispered. We kept it safe. A breeze slid across the lake, tugging gently at my sleeves, almost like an answer. And just like that, peace returned. Not the kind that hides from storms, but the kind you earn, protect, and pass on. The HOA was gone. The lake was free. The story was over. For now.